closed session, so all things will occur outside. Okay. I move that we come out of the closed session back into open session. If that's appropriate.
Second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, welcome back. We are now back in open session in our State Board of Elections meeting. The third item on our agenda is to certify vote totals for the May 17th, 2022 primary election and issue certificates of nomination to candidates receiving the highest number of votes in the primary ARS 118.365 subsection 1. And this is what they look like. They are pretty fancy, actually. We all signed them. These are official certifications to those who won their primary elections. And if I may, let me provide just a little bit of background for folks watching. We met on, I believe it was June 6th, and we, as a board, certified to the November ballot the various winners of primary elections of both major parties, winners of judicial primaries, all of the people that should be on the ballot in November. I believe it was hundreds of them in total, except we left off 6 individuals. Those 6 individuals are all Republicans. All of them won their elections in the initial count coming out of May 17th. It was 2 congressional candidates, state Senate candidate, and 3 state House candidates. Although the law, I believe, would have permitted us to certify those winners of those elections at that time, we elected to sit on those for a period of time because those 6 elections, they were not contested. There were no challenges filed. There were no allegations made of fraud or a mistaken count or administrative error or anything of that nature. But losing candidates in those 6 contests asked for recounts, filed petitions for recounts in the court system. Those 6 cases have made their way through the legal process. 4 of the 6 were demands for recounts in highly uncompetitive races that were decided by very, very lopsided margins. 2 of those were in elections that were relatively close. One, I think, was 58 votes out of a whole congressional district. That was pretty close. That was within maybe a 1/10 of a point. One of them was about a 3-point difference, about 300 votes. And the one that was the closest, 58 votes, the petitioner filed for a recount, did not take further action after that filing, did not post bond. And so under the law, that case has been dismissed, and the deadline for an appeal of that dismissal has passed. So there is simply no reason whatsoever to delay any further certification of the winner of that primary election. In the other case that was relatively close, a recount was performed last week. We have not yet received the formal report from that recount, but we understand that at most a vote or 2 changed based on how the machines read a ballot or 2 with erroneous voter use of the ballot, fulfillment of the ballot. But in any event, the purported goal of checking the tech has been done, and the tech works. The tech was not shown to be deficient in any way. This case is still in court. There's a hearing coming up later this week. But in any event, as I recall, all 6 of these recount petitioners have said openly they are not disputing the elections. They did not file contests under the statute to challenge who won and to declare themselves the rightful winner. In light of that, I think it's very important that we comply with the statute. I am specifically required by the law by the 4th Monday in August to certify to our county clerks what the ballot's going to say so they can do their job of getting ready for the election. I've got a deadline by statute I've got to follow. Moreover, we have got to let our clerks get ready for the November election. They need to spend the latter part of August and the early part of September getting their machines ready. And let me give a specific example of the sort of harm that these frivolous lawsuits bring on our taxpayers. It broke this morning in the newspaper, in the News Enterprise in E-Town, that in LaRue County, the school district had to pay thousands of dollars out of its budget to rent voting machines for a tax levy because the machines that the county already had were locked down for potential recount, pursuant to a demand by a candidate who lost by 36 points. It's been said repeatedly and falsely that there's no harm to the taxpayer with these actions, that even if they're frivolous, that so what, these folks are paying for them or they're not. Kentucky taxpayers are paying for them. We've had enough harm to our taxpayers and to our democracy by these folks. It's time to put an end to this madness and certify these poor people and let them get on with their fall campaigns. With that, I'll entertain a motion to certify vote totals for the remaining 6 candidates who won their elections in May 17th primary. With the motion.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it, and we will certify the 6 candidates. Thank you. Next, number 4, review of and vote on memorandum of agreement for election security fund reimbursements to counties that purchase voting equipment pursuant to memorandum of agreement. I'll let you translate that into English for us, Carol.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. This is an ongoing part of our agenda for the last several months. The state board had agreed that we would close a security grant and provide reimbursement funds to the counties that purchase new voting equipment. These 11 counties, and I'll name them off here quickly, have all met the criteria for reimbursement. Part of the criteria is they have purchased election equipment this year. They have provided fiscal court minutes approving the purchase. They have provided us with the invoice detailing the equipment purchased, and they have provided us the serial numbers for all of the equipment. So the counties that have submitted all of this documentation for approval today is Henry, requested $50,000. They're eligible for $50,000 in reimbursement. Taylor County, $50,000 requested, $50,000 eligibility. Cumberland County, $25,000. Their eligibility is $25,000. Whitley County, $90,000 requested, eligible for $90,000. McLean, $20,000 requested, $20,000 eligible. Bourbon County requested $40,000. They're eligible for $40,000. Perry is eligible for $92,500. They requested $92,500. Simpson County requested $32,500, eligible for $32,500. Lincoln County requested $42,500, eligible $42,500. Pike County eligible for $142,500. They requested $142,500. Lawrence County requested $45,000, eligible for $45,000. The county's eligibility is also based on the number of precincts they have. They're eligible 2,500 per precinct. That is how the counties come up with the eligible dollars and the requested dollars that we were asking for approval here today. And again, all the counties listed, these 11 counties have provided all of the documentation that we may move forward with approval today, Mr. Chairman.
And if you do the math, I had to use a calculator. It comes to $630,000 of funding for these 11 counties. If you add that to what the board has previously issued through the same sort of process, we are just shy of $3.5 million provided to our counties. So this is a very worthy project, I think. This is all due to funds that were appropriated by Congress and the president. And then in 2019, we applied for them in 2020. And so over the past couple of years, we've been divvying these out. In 2020, we also got COVID money. And so that was the first money that was spent. But now we're still getting around to spending the last of these funds. So $3.5 million for upgrades. It's really good news. I think we should all be really pleased about that. We have a motion to approve these reimbursements.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Do we have Rachel Pointer with us?
Good afternoon.
Hey there, Rachel. Rachel Pointer will give us now a financial report. Thank you, Rachel.
So I just wanted to start out pages 3 through 9 in your board book. Those are going to be the financials that will close out fiscal year 2022. Page 3, I wanted to make a note of a few of your monthly figures because they're a little higher than you normally see. So I wanted to give you just a brief explanation of why those are a bit different. It looks like on the postage category, you have a negative number. It's about negative $21,000. That's because we do get a $50,000 of allotment of restricted funds for use for list maintenance. And so at the end of the year, we had some the ERIC mailings that went out that you see in April, the $135,000. We had the $21,000 left over in our restricted funds that we could utilize by the end of the year. So we moved those off of general funding onto restricted funding to close out the year. So that's why you see that higher negative number there. In telecommunications, you're going to see in May, there's a $16,000 charge. That was as the MiFis were starting to be activated. Then you're going to see a little higher there for AT&T charges. We did move some of those to federal expenses in June, so you won't see a high number there. COT charges are our big data storage charges that are in the computer services category. Some of those are applicable to charge for federal funding. And we did that for the end of the year in May. That is why it's negative $24,000, and the $29,000 was a charge in June. So that netted to be an expenditure of $5,297.84. I just do want to say about that any COT charges, they charge in arrears. And so when we get to the end of the year in June, we do see higher totals because they are taking out for May and for June at the same time. So those are increased. The last number that I wanted to just make note of was the $15,000 that was in the furniture, and it was under furniture and equipment. That's because we did have developer licenses and software licenses that were renewed for the next fiscal year. And so they were renewed in June, and that's why those are a little bit higher. That object code falls under that category. For the rest of FY20, the only other thing we had, as the secretary has already told us about, we have reimbursed counties for voting equipment as those contracts have been passed through the Office of Procurement Services and finalized. So you'll see those expenditures. We also did receive an amendment to our election security award of $1 million that the secretary has also previously talked about. And so that hit in May. And then that closes us out with a summary of about $1.848 million in federal funding for the end of FY22. And you can see that summary on page 9. Does anybody have any questions about FY22 before we move on to the new fiscal year? Okay. Page 10 through 15 is FY23. I laid it out a bit differently, so I am open to any suggestions or corrections that or suggestions or changes that anybody would like to make to the format. I'm willing to hear all of them. Page 10 is the first page. That's our general fund operating. I wanted to keep that a little bit cleaner, so I just left that in small total. And then page 11 is a breakdown of the individual transactions that make up those totals with a brief description of what those are. And then page 12 is everything for election security. We previously had those qualified as 2018 and 2020 security funding, but the EAC did combine those grants into one. That's how we report on them. So I combined them here. Page 13 is HAVA Title II. All of the funds that are listed here, they were previously done individually in our board book, but I've put them all under one section because they do all comprise HAVA Title II. So this is all one grant as it's reported on, but they were deposited into individual funds when the awards were distributed. Page 14 is all of our state match funding and where we stand there. When we did start this project of reimbursing for voting equipment, we did have to utilize state match as restricted funds for that. And so we have done so along the way, and we are now down to about $7,500 in that state match account. Page 15 is more of a summary page, and that's a total at the bottom of how much federal funding we have and how much state funding we have overall. You will notice that FY23 is higher than FY22 as far as available federal funding. And that is because we did utilize all of our general funds at the end of FY22 to conserve federal funding and utilize general funding because those dollars do not roll over each year. So we have to spend them or lose them. And we spent every cent that we could in order to conserve more of our federal funding. Does anybody have any questions about the start of FY23? Anything about the new budget?
Good question for Member Johnson.
On page 11, under the detail surrounding telecommunications, there's a finance charge of $58,307. And if I'm reading it correctly, it's for AT&T MiFi charges.
Yes, the MiFis were still activated during the month of June. And so that's what we were paying for there in July. That charge for June hit. I have checked with the IT staff, and those MiFis will be deactivated starting in July. So we should see a much, much lower charge going forward.
So those are for the poll books, is that what they're for, or what are they?
Yes.
Connection to the internet, yes, in all the locations.
So that will be an ongoing expense for us related to poll books, or do counties take over that expense at some point?
Well, right now, we take care of that.
Okay. That's my only question. Thank you.
Any other questions? I sent out I know we've had some conversations for the past couple of months about interest and negative interest and how we claim that. I did send out an interest packet of some compiled information for you guys yesterday afternoon. Does anyone have any questions pertaining to that information that I could answer? Well, that's all I have for today.
Do we have a motion to approve these reports?
So move.
Member Johnson,
Second.
member Sears, second. All in favor? Say aye.
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 Say no. Ayes have it. Thank you very much. Okay, so on behalf of the Kentucky County Clerks Association, we have President Jason Denny with us. Jason, the floor is yours.
Not much today. As you know, most of our counties are looking at over their ballot quantities to try to understand based on each individual ballots, how many ballots to order. We're all concerned with constitutional amendments and things like that, and maybe putting an uptick in what most of us are seeing is low voter interest this year in a lot of our counties. A lot of things were decided in the primary, so we were assuming that we would probably have low voter turnout in the fall as well. But watching some other states that we're all preparing for what might be a little bit bigger voter turnout than anticipated. Machines are going to be set here in the coming weeks, and a lot of counties starting. We're still continuing to see what some of us, I guess, deem is frivolous open records requests, some that do not meet the statutory standards for an open records request. So we're having to answer those on a daily basis based on statute. So we're going through that. This coming Thursday, Wednesday, we have a tabletop exercise. Assistant Secretary Scutchfield is, I guess, going to be there leading that. Secretary, I don't know if you'll be there as well. I didn't know.
See you there.
Okay, great. And then on Thursday, the county clerks meet at their monthly meeting, and it's kind of we've had to delay a few things, but we're going to do, it's kind of a primary wrap-up meeting / best practices and do's and don'ts for the fall. We're going to share a lot of ideas, things we did in the last 2 election cycles. We have 8 to 10 new clerks that have taken office mid-year that most have never seen an election. So we're going to give them what we call a little schooling, and hopefully they'll ask some questions that might help us refresh ourselves. But State Board will be there as well for that. So we're gearing up for the upcoming election. This political climate that we're seeing right now. So we're just plugging along every day in elections. And I had a question asked by Keiko last week on basically the everyday life of a county clerk. What do we do?
Don't you do?
And in the short term, and what has changed, and what do most people not know about the county clerk's office? So the main answer for what they don't know we do is most people, you would find to believe, don't know that we handle the election process in the county. They just think motor vehicles. Inside of that, in my 14 years, elections has become the full-time job. I and my staff, if I looked at the hours we put in versus the hours on the motor vehicle line, even though motor vehicles is staffed heavier, the staffing is almost equal now of what it takes to keep the election process the way it should be, with voters changing information, moving in and out of counties, working with the SOS and Secretary of State's office on purging, the processes, and just the election laws that we've all been in favor of have put a lot more on the county offices. And this is a plug. Any legislators that are watching, we need more funding, please. Funding is a big issue with elections. If it wasn't for some other parts of our offices, we could not function and put on an election in Kentucky if it was not for the motor vehicle and the land record sides of our offices. So we just need to keep moving forward to that and keep asking for funding and fully fund elections in Kentucky.
Thank
That's all
you,
I've got.
Jason. Any questions for Jason? Well, I've got a comment or two. As Jason mentioned, tomorrow we are doing another tabletop the vote. This is a really worthy offering by our federal partners. Basically, it's sort of a war game of we're given situations with short notice, and we have to collectively work out solutions for how we're going to address those problems. This is something that we did. We meaning my office, the state board, staff, and the county clerks in 2020 and 2021. We learned a lot. We thought creatively. We learned things from each other. We learned things from our federal partners and vice versa. So it's a worthy enterprise. We'll be doing that tomorrow. And on a more personal note, I also want to say thank you to all the clerks. We have had at least 4 clerks that I know of, maybe more than that, in the past few weeks that have retired. Not retired at the end of their term, just quit their jobs. We've got, I believe it's 23 clerks that are scheduled to retire this year, maybe more, but at least 23 that opted to not run for re-election. This is a hard job. It's not getting any easier. And there's no one reason for this, but there's at least a couple. One of them is that we've made voting so much easier. Well, when you improve government services, that means people have to work harder. I'm proud that our state has done that, but there is a cost to it, which means a lot more work by our county clerks. The other reason, unfortunately, is the increasing vitriol and abuse and nonsense and misuse and abuse of our system. The frivolous open records requests, the frivolous recounts, all this stuff. It takes its toll on me and my staff. It takes its toll on the county clerks and their staffs. And I hope that at some point we'll move on from this era in our state. If there's nothing else for Jason, thank you, Jason, and I'll move on to
Secretary, if I may, one more thing. I just had this question asked. We all are doing our best to analyze our offices for the security cameras that we're going to have put in place in November. We're all working toward that right now, but that is a big obstacle to overcome in such a short period to get, and I don't do anything on a small scale in my office. If I need 1 camera, I'm going to put in 8. I'm going to go overboard with what I've got to do, but it's a lot of planning right now with everything else we do. And then the security cameras are just one other thing that we're having to put in and we're having to fund, along with a lot of changes that are coming down the pike in 2023. So I just want everybody to be aware that we all are working toward that right now on the security camera issue. And I do want to thank member Sears for coming to our June conference and speaking, giving us a lot of information on security cameras. He has a little bit of background in that, I think, and he brought a lot there. And Sherry was there as well. We thank them for coming down to conference and sharing that experience with us. And it was very good knowledge for the counties to know what to go look for when they were trying to install security cameras. So thank you, Dwight. Thank you, Sherry, for coming and supporting Dwight.
All right, thank you. So we'll move on to a report from our Executive Director, Karen Sellers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First thing I would like to address is have Mr. Howe's report on the risk limiting audit and update the board where we are on that process.
I'll be kind of brief, but I will tell you that we finally have a working document that with the procedures outlined that we've started reviewing on that with Jennifer Morrell, and she has done a wonderful job. And our working group with the 6 counties has done a wonderful job starting to review that, and we should be a lot farther along to next time we come to the board. We'll be almost finished with our procedures and have something to present, I think, that'll get us on our track for our pilot program on November. And everything looks like it's on track to do exactly what the legislature wanted us to do. So I guess if there's any questions on that, I can field them, or if Taylor has anything to add. I don't think so. We're brief. So thank you all very much.
Finished? Okay, no questions. Second thing I would like to bring up, and as a way of background, and I have mentioned this at previous meetings, House Bill 618 was signed into law that requires SBE to prepare a process for establishing e-poll book standards for certification, just as we certify election equipment. So the board had appointed a work group to look into this certification, this process to prepare these standards. That working group was members of the Secretary of State's office and the Secretary of State, 2 board members, Ms. Brangers and Ms. Whitehouse, and SBE staff, which includes 3 gentlemen I have on the Zoom, which were instrumental in the preparation of these standards. 3 of our IT members, Tom Watson, Jared Robinson, and Mark Ott. Taylor Brown was part of that group, as was Richard House and myself. This has been a pretty lengthy process, but I believe we have something very well put together for the board. I believe it went out to the board. Mr. Watson sent this to the board for prior review. I will like to defer to either Ms. Whitehouse or Ms. Brangers, as they were the SBE appointees from the board to be part of the work group, and ask them if they have any comments on the work that the group did and where we are currently with moving forward with getting this approval today.
Go ahead, Deanna.
Okay, I'm happy to address it. I mean, we've spent quite a few hours working within the work group, but really the lion's share of the work was done by our IT staff, led by Tom Watson and Mark and Jared. And they've put in countless hours to get us a document that I think, I know I feel comfortable with. It's not geared towards any one particular vendor. It's just so that we hit all of the metrics to find good systems that can be certified for the use in the state of Kentucky, which is something I felt was very important for quite some time. We've had a lot of thoughtful discussion. Board members should have gotten or did get last evening the documents for review. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on any of that. Obviously, you probably need to direct questions to Tom, but again, there was just a lot of work put into it, and it's along the same, framework of how we certify our machines. But this was, we've had machines for quite a while, and this was a new piece of equipment, and this gives us a path to find the types of equipment that will work well within our system. So I think that, obviously I'm happy to try to address any questions, but Tom may be better equipped to address questions.
I have one question. This is really dangerous when I'm asking IT questions. The question I would have is, comparatively speaking, the process for approval of the e-poll books versus a similar process that's used to approve voting machines. Is this rather standard, somewhat standard as it relates to the process we've been going through on voting machines? I know they're different products, but would you match those up in terms of due diligence and all that's required of the new set of processes versus what we've been doing that's been working for other pieces of equipment?
I feel like that's what has been captured by what we've created. I know there was a lot of thought gone into, how it will work within Kentucky, but also what's working well in other areas. And Tom, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'll even turn the camera on. I've got my computer glasses on, so my eyes are probably like bright blue.
They are.
So that's an excellent question. And the way we've addressed that is we took the best that we could find from about 6 different states. We went through all those documents and we went through our own, as you referred to the voting equipment. So just to give you in a very brief nutshell how this process will work, we have created a very thorough list of requirements, and those are minimum requirements for an e-poll book system in the state of Kentucky. It doesn't limit a vendor. Vendors can still, they can have their own things, they can do their own things, but the minimum set is in the requirements. Those requirements are then broken down into what we call a technical test matrix, and that is sent to a lab, a NIST certified lab that specializes in this kind of equipment and in voting equipment. And that's paid for by the vendor. So they send all of that material, all of the material that we request, all their documentation. They send all of their equipment. That all goes to this NIST certified lab. And that lab uses our metrics and goes down through these dozens and dozens of things. They build the system. They walk through elections. They look at reporting. They look at security. And that's before we ever see it. That's before it ever comes to Kentucky. It has to go through that. That lab will then send us that report, and whoever's on that team then can take that information and say, oh, good, they passed everything on this. We'll take a look at them. At that point, they are then required to come to Kentucky, come to the SBE office. And again, with the committee there's a different matrix that we've put together, which is on-site testing. So the vendor will put the equipment together there, and they will demonstrate that it is secure and effective in every scenario in person at the office. And it's only after all of that that the certification can occur.
And that's extremely helpful. I want to say, first of all, thanks for that explanation. I actually understood that. So
Sure.
That says a lot. That says a lot for me when I can understand. Jerry can understand, everybody should be able to. But I want to take a moment while doing this to recognize, Tom, just what an amazing job that you guys do. And not just the whole team, but particularly the complexity of the work that you and your teammates do in keeping us where we need to be. I've never been more impressed. And I don't know, I've said that publicly, but I just wanted to say it today. And I think what you're presenting to us today is another example of that kind of work. And it's very much appreciated, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much. We're all honored to do the work we do, and we're happy to do it.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question, please?
Please do.
I read the materials that we received, and I think Jerry just summed it up very well. It's obviously a lot of work, and I know from being on working groups that things get discussed. So what I'm about to raise has been discussed, and this is the language you guys arrived on, totally fine. But when I was reading it, in the certification document, there's 2 elements of this that seem very important. One is certifying, and then 2 is the ability to decertify, right? If we find that there's a problem, the ability to get rid of a bad actor or a faulty machine is just as important as certifying it in the first place. And I just had a little bit of concern the way the decertification process draft language reads. It basically says the State Board of Elections reserves the right to decertify any e-poll book product at any point that the agency deems it has cause to do so. I'm a little concerned about the has cause language, because I think what we're trying to do is give ourselves entire discretion to decide to decertify a machine. But when you add the element of cause, that means we have to explain, or somebody can get behind our decision making, which really puts that at issue. So I would just, maybe suggest we can change that to just say we can decertify at our discretion and leave it at that. I understand we're trying to be fair by putting the cause language in, but I just worry how that would be used against us later.
Let me ask a question coming out of your question, Taylor. And if we need to go into closed session for you to offer legal advice, I understand. But to Member Skolnick's point, what are our limitations under the Administrative Procedure Act with respect to having a basis for taking an action? Do we have to have some sort of a basis, some sort of a written conclusion or a vote? Do we have any limitations that require us to state some sort of a cause by default, or is that something that we're creating in this?
Yeah, I think the quick and dirty answer is that saying has cause and explaining the cause. As Member Skolnick was saying there, if we just use the reserve the right or whatever language was suggested there, a little bit more broader, I think that may be the safer way to go. I'm inclined off top to really understand.
There's nothing in the law that makes us have the for cause standard, right?
We don't have to, we can choose to.
If we decertify and someone didn't like it and challenged it, would we need to show cause in that scenario, or is it kind of a gray area?
Well, so that's the second part to this that we brought up yet, is that there's going to have to be an admin reg that associates itself with this as well. And so the admin reg is kind of what gives this all life, right? So this document will be, I guess the analogy is when we did some of the admin regs following 574 and 564, a lot of them had documents that went with them, new forms. I realize this isn't a form, but where we have the SBE 71, SBE 72. So this is a SBE, we'll pick it up. And so the admin reg is what's going to have to be, I guess, what's followed. And the admin reg will refer back to this. We can get challenged on this. I mean, as we've seen, people will file whatever they want.
You don't say.
Yeah, but, yeah. So,
Can I ask a question on this? You know, on this, we have basically a certification board that is mentioned in both the machine certification and now in the e-poll book certification process. Would it be this committee that makes a recommendation to decertify, or is it the State Board of Elections? Who would decertify, and then what would allow the vendor to be recertified? Would it be automatic, or would they come back before the certification panel to show that they fixed the issue, if per se? So how would that what would take place there? How would that really work? Because I don't remember my 14 years. Have we ever, Jenny, you were there for a while with Karen now. Do you all remember any decertification of any equipment in the past?
Not in my tenure.
I'm just, how would that work? Maybe I'm asking a question we shouldn't be worried about right now, but it's just kind of, if the certification team certifies it and brings it to the board, and then it's decertified by whom? And then do they go through the same certification process as they went through before, or just proving that they fixed the issue that they were decertified for? I know that's.
So the way we've got it written right now, Jason, is that, like, we're discussing it here in open, but this is a draft document, obviously, that you all got. So it's, you know, we want to make changes up until we approve it, we can. Right now it's the agency. So it says that first line, the state board reserves the right to decertify any public product when agency deems it has cause to do so. So I think the way we've got it written, you know, it's right here in a board meeting that we would decide, you know, we're going to decertify Billy Bob's poll books, right? Or whoever it may be. I'm just random example there. And then to recertify, we've got it written there that basically they're going through the same process as before with that committee, but then the board again, it would come to the board, taking the recommendation from the group to say, all right, they are recertified. And I did want to point out, just if this helps Member Johnson out too a little bit. So for when we're doing the voting equipment, the big difference with the voting equipment and the poll books is the involvement of the EAC. They're working on it. I don't know where they are with it, but EAC at this moment doesn't sign off on the poll books like they do the voting equipment. So that's why we're having to come up with this. This is kind of in lieu of what the EAC might do one day. Here we have this. And so with the voting equipment, after EAC looks at it, then it comes to the three-person panel. And Clerk Denny's been on it a couple times. A couple of people in this room on this call have been a part of it. And what we did is we mirrored that language from the equipment certification panel.
On the decertification?
No. So for the panel.
Gotcha. But is there like language on decertification?
Not right now. We don't have it going before the panel for the decertification. We've got it just going to the board as a whole.
But I'm saying under the voting equipment provision, is there a decertification process? And does it require cause as determined by the board?
So we've never participated in one. Don't know that
The only thing that the board did back in 28, I think Secretary was still on the board, and I apologize. But the board did make a decision not to certify any equipment that did not produce a paper ballot after that meeting.
Right.
But that's not really, they didn't decertify.
I've been on this committee for 8 years on the certification process, and it just come to me, I didn't think about this decertification.
You know, is it required that this be done today?
I think the idea is that this is a way for us to discuss and look for potential issues like what we've spotted, and then give Taylor some time to draft regulations, circulate them for review, and then vote on them at the next meeting. We have on our agenda a next meeting date of September 20th. However, I do think we'll need to come back before that time.
Yeah, per the bill that put this all into motion, it needs to be in existence on September 1st, which go back to the admin reg part of this conversation. It's going to have to come into effect in such a short time when the bill was passed to when this was written to September 1st. It's going to have to be an emergency regulation. You'll remember those from COVID. And the emergency regulations do require the governor's signature. So we've spoken to the governor's office. They know about it, but there is a time constraint from the legislation.
You know, I try my best not to try to practice law. I think that's illegal to do with it. So I have a mixed feeling about it. I mean, if we decertify somebody under the process and they come back in to be recertified, they're going to say, well, what did I do that I need to fix in the process? And if there is no for cause finding, I don't know. I mean, it's sort of like, well, just do it and we'll take it when we see it. You know, we know it when we see it. That bothers me a little, but at the same time, I recognize what Corey's saying in terms of don't box yourself into a position that limit, because we may not know what that looks like until something happens or somebody's not performing at a level that we need. So I guess I would ask, is there hybrid language that sort of allows that to happen without boxing you into a particular process.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to ask, just to be clear, we're not voting on anything today. We're not voting on this today, right? What we're doing is basically having an open discussion in public. And then we'll come back in a couple of weeks and we'll actually have a document to vote on. So to your question, no, we don't have to do this today.
Okay.
We
Okay.
won't.
The only reason I was asking, I didn't want us, because all of a sudden we had a question, get into another time crunch. You know, that because overall, I mean, I'm telling you, it's just very well done. And it's just, Corey's raised a very good question. And now maybe it is time for the attorneys to go back along with the IT folks and make recommendations based upon the conversation we've had today. And I'm just trying to figure out timing wise where we are and what it might look like.
So as a clerk getting ready to have to purchase new e-poll books, and once we certify, however many vendors apply, I would be very much upset if I was the vendor and the clerk that used that vendor, if it was decertified and I was not told why I was decertified, in order to fix the issue promptly to get recertified. Because if I'm the clerk using a certain vendor and they're decertified, my election cannot move forward. So I would want my vendor to know what they need to do very quickly to be recertified, or we can move on with the election process. So I just think if we decertify somebody, we need to tell them why.
I think we can.
What to fix.
That's not a problem to insert that in there, where instead of what we deem to have cause, we just we will issue findings of why we believe they should be decertified. That gives them something to work off of towards a recertification, and it's not like we're just doing this.
Yeah, and I would be comfortable with that too. My concern isn't that people have information. My concern is just the way that something is written that gives somebody the ability to challenge the decertification to begin with, that gets us involved in a circus. But I agree with your comments, Jim.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Lewis.
Yeah. Well, my understanding on this process would be that if it meets the minimum standards, it would have to, before decertification could take place, it would have to somehow fall below the minimum standard requirements. I mean, the cause would have, in my way, the way I would look at it, if you meet minimum standards, the board would have, I'm not sure you could decertify if they met the standards we have set out for them. And there'd have to be an issue with the piece of equipment and the standards. Does that not make sense?
I'll speak for the group here then. Yeah, I think we're on the same page, Mr. Lewis. I think the concern is, I don't know why throughout this I've said Billy Bob's poll book is my fictional, my fictional poll book provider. But if Billy Bob meets the certification standard in 2022, but for whatever reason starts failing to provide the service as agreed to by these minimum standards in 23 or 24 or whatever, that's what we're worried about, and trying to prevent it with the decertification process. It's maintaining that minimum level that got them certified.
Oh, that's what I was saying. If it doesn't, it would have to fail to meet the minimum standards, I think, before you could even have a case for decertification. Because as Jason said, county clerks and county boards going to a huge expense here and could be caught in the middle of an election cycle at a very severe disadvantage and problem for them. if their equipment was suddenly decertified?
If you'd like, I can address from an IT perspective why this is important.
Okay.
One of the primary things is security, of course, and security is an ever evolving roundabout of technology and threat. And so without being able to decertify, which all of the election equipment has that ability, that I've researched, you might find yourself in a position where something occurs on the world stage and it needs to be addressed, and you couldn't force the addressing of that as would be appropriate. Decertification could be used at that point to address that security issue. And then, all the details that Corey and everyone is talking about makes perfect sense to me. Whatever that process is that's proper there. But we want to be careful thinking of our standards as, okay, these are the 2022 standards and we're finished. We're not. Things will change and there'll have to be adaptations as we move forward, if that helps at all. And also, not that I was suggesting that it would come to decertification, but it's one of the tools in our toolkit of making sure that certain things don't happen, that a county doesn't have something with a known issue. Does that make sense, Jason?
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you have the sense of the room well enough to make edits to that portion?
And I'll distribute a cleaned up version of this and a preliminary admin reg for everybody to look at, and then we're not there on the agenda, but I would ask if we could do just a real brief special sometime before the 1st that will allow the governor maybe a little time to sign it and return it to, so we can file with ours.
I'll just throw out, does anyone have a conflict to meet again on the 30th? That's a Tuesday, 2 weeks from today. I won't put you on the spot, but be thinking about that if you can, and try to hold that
It's
day.
be about 10 for me. I can do it. It won't be at 10 o'clock. I can't do it at 10. I can't do it 2. So that's where I run into a problem. But
I'll make a note, Member Johnson can't do 10 or 2, but if you all would let us know.
I could do 3. Or I could do 11. I could do 3:30. President, she decides to take extra time.
If you all can be thinking about that day, and then let Karen know if you've got a conflict, and we'll come back to that.
Is that soon enough?
30th.
I mean, didn't you say you had to have something for the governor to send?
I
September
We
1st?
made them aware.
I think that should be fine, because
Okay.
what I'll end up.
You'll be able to share it with them in advance.
What I'll end up doing is I think we'll have. The meat of this is not going to be in there, where the meat of it is this document. So I'll send what we have to them, like this is our preliminary, where we're headed, just kind of keep them in the loop as well.
I don't feel like we're very far apart on what we have.
Are there any other questions or suggestions on this before we move on? Do you have anything else, Karen?
I was just going to add, and I'll do it very briefly. I believe I had mentioned this before, that the General Assembly and the governor had signed off on 25 million in this biennium for election equipment, which, 12.5 in FY23, 12.5 in FY24, for the counties to be by January 1st of 24, all verified voter paper trail audit compliant. The first, and we've been working closely with DLG, the language says that DLG and SBE will work together. We're helping them with criteria, review of all the documents, then we will send it to DLG, and then they will be in charge of getting the memorandum of agreement signed with the counties and moving forward with the contract and giving the counties reimbursement. The process now that we're discussing, and we've notified the clerks, we'll talk to them about it on Thursday, is that the first piece of the 12.5 million will reimburse the county clerk for 100% of the poll book purchase only in that portion. And then the next step will be, going forward with additional election equipment. But I did want to mention that based on 618, the life of the current poll books, this will be good for the counties to pull their numbers together, work with a certified poll book company, vendor, and they'll start out with new poll books. So, and that concludes my report, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments for Karen? And again, this is separate money from the federal money that we
Yes.
distributed earlier in the meeting.
Yes.
Separate pot of money. This is from our state legislature,
Yes.
not from Congress.
Yes.
Okay, so the next thing I have on our agenda, number 8, executive session pursuant to KRS 61.8101M to discuss security matters. Do I have a motion to go into the executive session?
So moved.
Member Johnson, do we have a second?
Second.
Member Lewis, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, see you in a minute. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, are you finished with Jared, Mark, and I?
Yes, thank you. I think so.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
all.
Bye-bye.
Unless we need them on for this season.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you,
You're
guys.
welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Rachel.
Rachel, yes.
Rachel is actually staying.
Wasn't trying to push you out, Rach.
I'll say bye to everyone so I can quiet there.
I'm on my cell phone, guys. That's why my phone, I've been going in and out on video, so I don't make any of my motion sickness.
We offline.
Yes. Just give us one
Okay.
minute.